The scent of garlic and tomato sauce hung heavy in the air of Bella Rosa, mingling with the soft classical music playing from hidden speakers. My feet ached after 8 straight hours of carrying trays loaded with pasta and wine glasses. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, feeling it escape from the tight bun I'd secured at the start of my shift. 3 more tables to serve, then I could finally head home to my tiny apartment and soak my blistered feet. "Table 7 needs more bread," Marco, the head waiter, snapped as he brushed past me without making eye contact. It was always like that here. I was invisible unless something needed to be done. I grabbed a fresh basket and wove between the tables, smiling mechanically at patrons who barely glanced up from their conversations. The restaurant catered to Brooklyn's elite, people whose dinner bills exceeded my daily wages. I was background noise to them, part of the expensive ambiance they paid for. As I approached the corner table, the best in the house, reserved for special guests, I noticed an elderly woman sitting alone. She wore an elegant navy dress with a pearl necklace that caught the dim lighting. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Something about her vulnerability among all this pretentious wealth struck a chord within me. "Would you like some fresh bread, ma'am?" I asked, setting the basket down carefully. She looked up with warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Thank you, dear. What's your name?" "Sophie," I replied, surprised by the simple human acknowledgement. "I'm Maria," she said. "Would you mind—" She hesitated, opening her small beaded purse with shaking fingers. "I need to take my medication, but these old hands aren't cooperating today." Without hesitation, I set down my serving tray and moved closer. "Of course, let me help you." She pulled out a small pill organizer and pointed to the compartment marked for evening doses. I carefully opened it and placed 2 pills in her palm, then handed her the water glass. As she swallowed the medication, I noticed her breathing seemed labored. "Are you feeling all right, Ms. Maria? Can I get you anything else?" "Just some company for a moment if you're not too busy," she said, patting the empty chair beside her. "My son is running late, and dining alone is such a dreary affair." I glanced around nervously. Marco would have a fit if he saw me sitting with a customer, but something in Maria's eyes made it impossible to refuse. I perched on the edge of the chair, ready to spring up if my manager appeared. "You're very kind," Maria said, her Italian accent becoming more pronounced. "Not many young people today would take the time." "My grandmother raised me," I explained. "She taught me to respect my elders. A wise woman, your grandmother." Maria nodded approvingly. "Are you in school, Sophie?" "I was studying nursing, but had to take a break." I didn't elaborate on how my grandmother's medical bills had drained my savings, forcing me to drop out and work 2 jobs. How I'd been 1 semester away from completing my degree when everything fell apart. Maria seemed to read between the lines. Life has a way of interrupting our plans, doesn't it? But the right path finds us eventually. The restaurant doors swung open then, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations quieted. Silverware stopped clinking against plates. Even Marco, who had been berating a busboy, fell silent and straightened his posture. A tall man entered, flanked by 2 others who scanned the room with practiced precision. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that emphasized broad shoulders and a commanding presence. His dark hair was styled impeccably, with silver threads at the temples that only enhanced his aura of authority. A heavy gold watch glinted at his wrist as he adjusted his cufflinks. My heart raced as I recognized him from newspaper articles and whispered rumors. Antonio Russo, the most powerful man in Brooklyn's Italian community, legitimate businessman on paper, but everyone knew his real influence extended far beyond his imported olive oil empire. "I should get back to work," I whispered to Maria, suddenly feeling exposed, but it was too late. Antonio's eyes had already locked onto our table. His expression was unreadable as he approached with measured steps, his security detail hanging back just far enough to give the illusion of privacy. "Mama," he said, kissing Maria on both cheeks. His voice was surprisingly soft, with the same melodic Italian accent as his mother's, but deeper, more controlled. "I apologize for my tardiness." "Antonio, this is Sophie," Maria said, gesturing toward me. "She's been keeping me company and helped me with my medication." I stood quickly, nearly knocking over the chair in my haste. "I was just—" Antonio's gaze cut through me like a physical force. Up close, I could see his eyes were almost black, framed by thick lashes, revealing nothing of his thoughts. A small scar bisected his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in his otherwise flawless face. He smelled of expensive cologne and something more primal: power. "You helped my mother?" he asked, each word precisely measured. I nodded, unable to find my voice under his scrutiny. The room seemed to have shrunk, the air growing thinner. "She was very kind, Antonio," Maria interjected. My hands were shaking, and she opened my pills for me. Then she stayed to keep me company while I waited for you. Something shifted in his expression, a softening so subtle I might have imagined it. "You have my gratitude," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Oh no, please," I stammered, backing away slightly. It was nothing, really. His eyebrow arched slightly, and I realized my mistake. Men like Antonio Russo weren't accustomed to refusals. I'd stepped into a world where different rules applied. A world I knew nothing about. "Sophie!" Marco's sharp voice cut through the tension. He appeared at my side, his face pale as he recognized who I was speaking with. "I apologize for any disturbance, Mr. Russo." "No disturbance," Antonio replied coolly, his eyes never leaving my face. "Your waitress was assisting my mother." Marco's expression flickered between confusion and fear. "Of course. Sophie, table 9 needs their check." I nodded, grateful for the escape. "It was nice meeting you, Ms. Maria," I said, deliberately avoiding her son's intense gaze. As I turned to leave, I heard Antonio's voice again. "You just earned my respect, Sophie. That's worth more than money in this city." A shiver ran down my spine as I hurried away, feeling his eyes tracking my movement across the dining room. I didn't understand why such a simple act of kindness had captured the attention of the most dangerous man in Brooklyn, but something told me my life had just changed irrevocably. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I kept glancing at the corner table where Antonio dined with his mother, their conversation animated but too quiet to overhear. Occasionally I caught him watching me, his expression contemplative. Each time our eyes met, I quickly looked away, pretending to be busy with other customers. When they finally left, Maria waved goodbye with a warm smile. Antonio nodded once in my direction, a gesture that somehow felt more significant than words. Marco rushed to the table afterward, and blanched when he saw the tip. Several $100 bills tucked under a wine glass. "He left this for you," Marco said grudgingly, handing me an envelope with my name written in elegant script. I waited until I was alone in the employee bathroom to open it. Inside was a business card, heavy stock, minimalist design, with only a name and number. On the back, a handwritten note. "My mother takes her heart medication at 8 p.m. daily. She enjoys company while she dines. The position pays well. A.R." My hands trembled as I stared at the card. Was he offering me a job? As what? His mother's companion? It seemed too simple, too legitimate for someone like him. There had to be more to it. Yet the thought of escaping this restaurant, of making enough money to perhaps return to school someday, was temptingly sweet. I slipped the card into my pocket, unsure what to do. The smart choice would be to throw it away, to stay far from the complicated world of the Russos. But as I walked home that night, past the shuttered storefronts and through the dimly lit streets of my neighborhood, I couldn't stop thinking about Maria's kind eyes and Antonio's penetrating gaze. My apartment felt especially small and empty when I arrived. The pipes clanged and the neighbor's television blared through the thin walls. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto my secondhand couch, massaging my aching feet. On the coffee table lay the final notice for my grandmother's hospital bills, the reason I worked doubles at the restaurant and weekend shifts at the convenience store. I pulled out Antonio's card again, running my finger over the embossed lettering. One phone call could change everything, but at what cost? My phone buzzed with a text from my landlord. "Rent increase starts next month, sorry." I stared at the ceiling, feeling the walls of my life closing in. Tomorrow I would make a decision. Tonight I just needed sleep. As I drifted off, Antonio's words echoed in my mind. "You just earned my respect." In his world, I suspected that meant something dangerous and valuable all at once. What I didn't know then was that by morning, the decision would no longer be mine to make. I woke to pounding on my door, harsh, insistent knocks that rattled the cheap wood in its frame. Sunlight streamed through my threadbare curtains, and a glance at my phone showed it was barely 7 a.m. Fear crawled up my spine as the knocking continued. "Who is it?" I called, my voice cracking with sleep and anxiety. "Delivery for Sophie Reeves," a gruff male voice answered. I hadn't ordered anything, and few people even knew my full name. Cautiously, I approached the door and peered through the peephole. A tall man in a black suit stood outside, sunglasses hiding his eyes despite the early hour. Behind him, I could make out another similarly dressed figure. "I'm not expecting any packages," I said through the door. "From Mr. Russo," the man replied simply. My heart skipped. Antonio Russo. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in my wallet, even though I hadn't made the call. How did he know where I lived? Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door but kept the chain on, opening it just enough to see the man's impassive face. He held out a large white box tied with a silver ribbon. "Mr. Russo requests your presence for brunch at his residence. 11 o'clock, he stated. Not a question, but a command. The car will collect you at 10:30. "I have work at noon," I replied automatically, though it was a lie. Saturday was my day off from the restaurant. The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Russo has spoken with your employer. You've been granted the weekend off." A chill ran through me. Antonio had already inserted himself into my life, rearranging it without my consent. I wanted to refuse, to slam the door and pretend last night had never happened. But curiosity and something more dangerous, hope, kept me rooted to the spot. "What's in the box?" I asked. "Appropriate attire," he answered. "Will you be ready at 10:30, Miss Reeves?" The question hung in the air between us. I knew I was standing at a crossroads, that whatever I decided would irrevocably alter the course of my life. The sensible choice was clear. "Yes," I heard myself say. "I'll be ready." He nodded once, handed me the box through the gap in the door, and turned to leave without another word. I closed the door quickly, sliding down against it until I sat on the floor, the mysterious box in my lap. With trembling fingers, I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a dress the color of champagne. I pulled it out carefully, gasping at the weight of the material. Real silk, not the polyester blends I was accustomed to. Beneath it were matching shoes and a small velvet jewelry box containing pearl earrings that looked antique and impossibly valuable. A note card rested at the bottom, the same elegant handwriting as before. "For your brunch with Mama. She has requested your company specially. AR." I sat back against the door, staring at the gifts. They were beautiful, tasteful even, but the implicit message was clear. I wasn't acceptable as I was. The clothes I owned, mostly thrift store finds and fast fashion pieces, weren't good enough for the world I was about to step into. Rather than being offended, I felt an odd sense of relief. At least Antonio Russo was honest about the transaction taking place. He wanted something from me, companionship for his mother, perhaps more that remained unspoken, and he was willing to pay for it, starting with this dress. I showered quickly, trying to wash away my misgivings along with the lingering scent of restaurant grease in my hair. As I slipped the dress over my head, the silk caressed my skin like water. It fit perfectly, raising questions I didn't want to contemplate about how Antonio had obtained my measurements. The shoes, too, were exactly my size, the heels high enough to be elegant, but low enough that I could walk without stumbling. Looking in my bathroom mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The dress transformed my figure, the color warming my pale skin. With the pearl earrings and my hair swept up, I looked like I belonged in the world of Bella Rosa's patrons, rather than its staff. At precisely 10:30, my phone buzzed with a text. Car waiting outside. The black sedan idling at the curb looked wildly out of place in my neighborhood, drawing curious stares from the teenagers loitering on the corner and the old men playing chess at the bodega. The driver stepped out as I approached, opening the rear door with a slight bow. "Miss Reeves," he acknowledged, his expression as neutral as the man who had delivered the box. The car's interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched my neighborhood recede through the tinted windows, feeling like I was leaving more than just a physical location behind. We drove through Brooklyn, crossing into areas I rarely visited. Neighborhoods where trees lined the streets and brownstones stood tall and well-maintained. Finally, we turned onto a private drive flanked by an imposing iron gate that swung open at our approach. The Russo residence was a stately mansion set back from the road, surrounded by manicured gardens. It wasn't ostentatious, but rather spoke of old money and understated power. A fountain bubbled in the circular driveway where the car came to a stop. Before I could reach for the door handle, it opened from outside. A middle-aged woman in a simple black dress stood waiting, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Miss Reeves," she said with a slight Italian accent. "I'm Francesca, the housekeeper. Please follow me. Signora Russo is waiting in the garden." I followed her through a marble-floored foyer where Renaissance paintings hung on paneled walls, past rooms glimpsed through open doors. A library with leather-bound books. A formal dining room with a chandelier that caught the morning light. The house was beautiful, but felt lived in, not like a museum. Francesca led me through French doors that opened onto a stone patio surrounded by roses in full bloom. Maria sat at a glass-topped table beneath a pergola draped with wisteria, looking even more elegant than she had in the restaurant. She wore a light blue dress and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded her face from the morning sun. "Sophie!" she exclaimed, her face lighting up. "How lovely to see you again. The dress is perfect, isn't it? I helped Antonio choose it." My tension eased slightly at her warm welcome. "It's beautiful, Ms. Maria. Thank you. I feel like Cinderella." She laughed, the sound musical and genuine. "Come, sit. And please call me Maria. We're going to be friends, I can tell." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Antonio will join us shortly. Business calls, always business." A server appeared silently, pouring coffee into delicate china cups. The table was set with pastries, fruit, and various dishes I didn't recognize, a far cry from my usual breakfast of yogurt eaten standing over the kitchen sink. "I hope you don't mind that we invited you on such short notice," Maria said, adding sugar to her coffee. "After meeting you yesterday, I told Antonio I wanted you as my companion. My health isn't what it used to be, and my son worries when I'm alone." "Your companion?" I asked, trying to understand what exactly was being proposed. "Yes, dear. To accompany me to lunches, the opera, shopping, to help with my medication when my arthritis flares up." She waved her slightly gnarled hands. "Antonio has been looking for someone suitable for months, but I've refused them all. Too stiff. Too obsequious." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Most of them just wanted access to my son. But you helped me before you knew who I was. That speaks to your character." I sipped my coffee, unsure how to respond. The offer seemed innocent enough on the surface, but I wasn't naive. Nothing involving the Russo family could be as simple as it appeared. "I'm not sure I'm qualified," I said carefully. "I was studying nursing, but I didn't finish my degree." "All the better," Maria replied. "Some medical knowledge would be useful. And Antonio mentioned you're between opportunities right now." Again, I wondered how much Antonio knew about me and how he'd obtained that information. The thought should have frightened me more than it did. "The position includes a generous salary, of course," Maria continued. "And the guest house on the property, if you wish to live closer, or Antonio could arrange an apartment nearer to us, if you prefer independence." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. A salary that would allow me to live without roommates? To possibly return to school? It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "May I ask why me specifically?" "I'm sure there are professional nurses or companions with more experience." Maria's brown eyes, so like her son's but warmer, more expressive, studied me thoughtfully. "Experience isn't everything, Sophie. Trust is more valuable, especially in our family, and there's something about you, a strength beneath the vulnerability." Like a diamond hidden in coal, she reached across the table to pat my hand. "Besides, my intuition is never wrong. Is it, Antonio?" I startled, not having heard him approach. Antonio stood at the entrance to the pergola, watching us with that same inscrutable expression. Today he wore a light gray suit that fit him perfectly, no tie. The top buttons of his shirt undone in a casual display that somehow made him look even more dangerous. "Never, Mama," he agreed, crossing to kiss her cheek before taking the seat between us. His eyes swept over me, noting the dress, the earrings, my upswept hair. Something like satisfaction flickered across his features. "Sophie, I'm glad you accepted our invitation." Up close, in daylight, I could see more details I'd missed in the dimly lit restaurant. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than I'd witnessed. The way his hands, though manicured, bore calluses that hinted at work beyond boardrooms. The subtle, almost imperceptible movement of his eyes as he continually scanned our surroundings. Always alert, always watching. "Thank you for the clothes," I said, finding my voice. "But I'm still not sure what exactly you're offering me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Direct. I appreciate that." He nodded to the server, who immediately poured him coffee and then disappeared. "What we're offering is exactly as my mother described. A position as her companion, with compensation that reflects the importance of her care." "And the catch?" I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. Maria chuckled, but Antonio's expression grew serious. "The catch, as you put it, is discretion. Our family values privacy. You would see and hear things that must remain within these walls." He leaned forward slightly. "You would be entering our world, Sophie. It's different from yours. There are rules, expectations." "What your son means," Maria interjected, "is that we live under scrutiny. The Russo name attracts attention, not all of it welcome." I understood what remained unsaid. The rumors about Antonio's business dealings, the whispered stories of rivals who disappeared, the way people at the restaurant had frozen when he walked in. "I should tell you," I said, my heart pounding. "I'm not comfortable with anything illegal." Antonio didn't flinch at my directness. If anything, that ghost of a smile returned. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, Sophie. I'm asking you to care for my mother, to be loyal to my family. The rest doesn't concern you." A heavy silence fell. In the distance, I could hear birds singing in the garden, oblivious to the tension beneath the wisteria. I knew I should walk away. This wasn't just a job offer, it was an induction into something I didn't fully understand. Yet the alternatives, returning to my cramped apartment, to mounting bills and dead-end jobs, seemed suddenly unbearable. "When would you want me to start?" I asked finally. Maria clapped her hands together in delight. "Excellent. How about a trial period? 1 week starting today. Stay the weekend here as our guest. Get to know our routines, our home. If you're uncomfortable after that, no hard feelings." I glanced at Antonio, whose expression had settled into something unreadable again. "Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Russo?" "Antonio," he corrected. "And yes, a trial period is sensible." He studied me for a moment longer. "I've already had your things brought from your apartment. Francesca will show you to the guest house after brunch." My mouth fell open. "You had my things brought here, before I agreed?" For the first time he smiled fully. A flash of perfect teeth that transformed his face but didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm not accustomed to refusal, Sophie." The warning in those words was unmistakable. I had agreed to this arrangement, but I was beginning to understand that leaving it might not be so simple. As if sensing my unease, Maria reached over to squeeze my hand. "Don't mind my son's methods, dear. He's used to solving problems efficiently. But I promise you'll be happy here. The guest house is lovely, private but close enough if I need you." Antonio checked his watch. "I have calls to make." "Mama, I leave Sophie in your capable hands." He stood, buttoning his jacket with a practiced motion. "Sophie, we'll speak more this evening." As he walked away, his phone already at his ear, Maria leaned toward me conspiratorially. "He likes you, you know. I can tell." "I don't think your son likes anyone, Maria," I replied, watching his retreating figure. She laughed softly. "Oh, you'd be surprised. Antonio sees much more than he reveals, just like his father." A shadow crossed her face at the mention of her husband, quickly replaced by her usual warmth. "Now, tell me more about your nursing studies." "I always wanted to be a nurse myself." As we chatted, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just signed a contract whose terms I didn't fully understand. The garden was beautiful, the food exquisite, Maria's company delightful, yet beneath it all ran an undercurrent of something dangerous. I had stepped into Antonio Russo's world now, and some instinct told me that leaving it wouldn't be as simple as packing my bags and walking away. What I didn't know yet was just how right that instinct would prove to be. The guest house exceeded every expectation. What Maria had modestly called a guest house was in reality a charming cottage that could have been featured in an architectural magazine. Set at the edge of the property near a small ornamental pond, it offered privacy while remaining within sight of the main house. Inside, I found a spacious living area with a fireplace, a fully equipped kitchen, and a bedroom with the most comfortable-looking bed I'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the garden, flooding the space with natural light. Fresh flowers adorned every room, their sweet scent mingling with the clean smell of polished wood. My belongings had indeed been brought over, though they looked pathetically out of place in these elegant surroundings. My worn novels stacked neatly on an antique side table, my threadbare towels folded in a pristine bathroom larger than my entire apartment kitchen. The contrast was jarring. "Is everything to your liking?" Francesca asked from the doorway, startling me. "It's beautiful," I admitted. "Too beautiful for me, honestly." Her expression softened slightly. "Signora Maria insisted on preparing it personally for you. She doesn't often take to people so quickly." "She's very kind," I said, running my fingers along the marble countertop. "Has she always had health problems?" Francesca's face closed immediately. "It's not my place to discuss the family's medical history." She handed me a small device that looked like a smartphone. "This is connected directly to the main house. Signora Maria's schedule is programmed in, along with her medication times. If she needs you, it will alert you immediately." I took the device, nodding as she explained its functions. It was sophisticated, far more than a simple pager system. It showed Maria's vital signs in real time, tracked her movement through the house, and contained detailed medical information. "This is extensive," I said, scrolling through the apps. "Does Maria know she's being monitored this closely?" Francesca's lips thinned. "Mr. Russo takes his mother's health very seriously. The system was installed after her collapse last year." This was the first I'd heard of a collapse. "What happened to her?" "Heart arrhythmia. She was alone for several hours before being found." Francesca checked her watch. "Signora will rest until dinner. Mr. Russo requests your presence in his study at 6. I'll come to escort you." With that, she left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Alone, I explored my new temporary home more thoroughly. The closet was already half filled with clothes in my size, casual wear, dresses, even workout attire, all with designer labels I'd only seen in magazines. The bathroom contained high-end cosmetics and toiletries. It was as if they'd anticipated my every need, which was both thoughtful and unsettling. I showered and changed into jeans and a simple blouse from my own clothes, a small act of independence. Then I curled up in a plush armchair by the window with one of my novels, trying to process the surreal turn my life had taken in just 24 hours. Outside, the manicured grounds stretched to a high stone wall, topped with discreet but unmistakable security measures. Beyond it, I could just make out the rooftops of neighboring estates. The property was a beautiful cage, I realized, designed to keep threats out, but perhaps also to keep its occupants in. At precisely 6 o'clock, Francesca knocked on my door. She led me back to the main house, through corridors I hadn't seen that morning, until we reached a heavy wooden door. She knocked once, then left me standing alone when a deep voice called, "Enter." Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. Antonio's study was exactly what I might have imagined for a man like him. Walls lined with bookshelves, a massive desk of dark wood, leather furniture in deep browns and burgundies. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, despite the mild evening, casting dancing shadows across the room. Antonio stood with his back to me, gazing out a window that overlooked the front gates. He'd changed into more casual attire. Dark slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. Without turning, he said, "Close the door behind you, Sophie." I did as instructed, the latch clicking with what seemed like excessive finality. Antonio turned then, his dark eyes assessing me. If he noticed I wasn't wearing any of the new clothes provided, he gave no indication. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. He remained standing, a power move I recognized from my brief time in corporate offices before dropping out of school. "I hope the accommodations are satisfactory." "They're far more than satisfactory," I replied honestly. "The guest house is beautiful." He nodded, as if my approval was expected but irrelevant. "I want to be clear about my expectations, Sophie. My mother is everything to me. Her comfort and safety are my highest priorities." "I understand that," I said, "but I'm still not clear on exactly what my role entails." Antonio moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a crystal decanter. "Drink?" he offered. I shook my head. "No, thank you." He poured himself a finger of amber liquid, swirling it gently before taking a sip. "Your role is simple. Be my mother's companion. Ensure she takes her medications. Accompany her to social engagements. Keep her company when I'm unable to." He set his glass down. "You'll have access to a car and a credit card for expenses. Your salary will be deposited weekly, $10,000. I nearly choked. $10,000? Weekly? A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Is that insufficient?" It's more than I made in 6 months at the restaurant," I stammered. "Then we're in agreement." He walked around the desk, leaning against it just a few feet from where I sat. The proximity was intimidating. Up close, I could see a faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, smell the subtle cologne that clung to his skin. "There are conditions, of course." "Of course," I echoed, trying to maintain my composure. "Absolute loyalty, discretion. My mother's business is family business, and family business is private." His voice hardened slightly. "You will have access to our home, our conversations. You'll meet our associates. What you see and hear remains confidential." I nodded slowly. "I understand confidentiality. It was part of my nursing training. This goes beyond professional ethics, Sophie." He leaned forward slightly. "You're entering a circle of trust. Breaking that trust would have consequences." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. I sat straighter, refusing to be intimidated despite my racing heart. "I don't respond well to threats, Mr. Russo." To my surprise, he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "Antonio," he corrected again. "And that wasn't a threat. It was information. I believe in clear communication." "Then let me be equally clear," I said, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "I'll care for your mother to the best of my abilities. I'll respect your family's privacy. But I won't be involved in anything illegal, and I won't be treated like property." I expected anger at my directness. Instead, Antonio looked pleased. He returned to his seat behind the desk, studying me with newfound interest. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect? Someone who would accept the arrangement without question, who would be overwhelmed by the money, the lifestyle." He picked up his drink again. "Most people are easily bought, Sophie. Perhaps you've been surrounding yourself with the wrong people." His laugh was unexpected, short and genuine. "Perhaps I have." He pressed a button on his desk. "Francesca will show you back to the guest house. Dinner is at 8 in the main dining room. Wear something from the new collection." It was clearly a dismissal. I stood, turning to leave, but paused at the door. Why me, really? There must be hundreds of qualified nurses or companions who would jump at this opportunity. Antonio was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "When I saw you with my mother, you treated her with genuine kindness. Not because of who she is or what she could offer you, but because it's your nature." His expression darkened. "That's rare in my experience." Before I could respond, the door opened and Francesca appeared. Our conversation was over. Back at the guest house, I found myself standing in front of the closet, staring at the new clothes. Antonio's instruction to wear something from the new collection felt like a test. Part of me wanted to defy him, to appear at dinner in my own clothes again. But another part, the practical part, recognized that antagonizing my new employer over something so trivial was foolish. I selected a simple black dress that looked the least ostentatious. As I slipped it on, the fine fabric settled against my skin like a whisper. The matching shoes pinched slightly, but I'd endured worse during long shifts at the restaurant. Francesca arrived promptly at 8 to escort me to dinner. The main dining room was smaller and more intimate than I'd expected, with a table set for just 3. Maria was already seated, wearing a flowing caftan in vibrant blues and greens that brightened her complexion. "Sophie, that dress is perfect on you," she exclaimed as I entered. "Isn't she lovely, Antonio?" Antonio, who had risen at my entrance, merely nodded. He held out a chair for me, his fingers brushing my shoulder lightly as I sat. The casual touch sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. Dinner was a surprisingly relaxed affair. Maria dominated the conversation, telling stories about her childhood in Sicily, her migration to America as a young bride, the early days of the family business. Antonio spoke little but watched his mother with obvious affection, occasionally interjecting to correct a detail or prompt another story. I found myself genuinely enjoying Maria's company. She was witty, perceptive, and had a gift for storytelling that made even mundane events sound fascinating. In another life, she might have been a writer or actress instead of the wife and mother of powerful men. "Sophie, Antonio tells me you were studying nursing," Maria said, as servers cleared the main course. "Why did you stop?" I hesitated, glancing at Antonio, whose attention was now fully focused on me. "My grandmother got sick, pancreatic cancer, the medical bills." I trailed off, not wanting to revisit the painful memory of watching my grandmother's savings disappear, followed by my own. Maria reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm sorry, dear. Is she passed away last year," I said softly. "And the bills remain," Antonio stated rather than asked. I nodded, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "They're being managed." Antonio exchanged a look with his mother that I couldn't interpret. "We'll discuss that tomorrow," he said, in a tone that brooked no argument. After dessert, a tiramisu so delicious I had to restrain myself from groaning with pleasure, Maria announced she was tired. "Sophie, would you help me to my room? I'm feeling a bit unsteady tonight." "Of course," I agreed, rising immediately. "I'll join you shortly, Mama," Antonio said, kissing her cheek. "I have some calls to make first." I offered Maria my arm, noticing that she did indeed seem more fatigued than she had that morning. Her steps were slower, her breathing slightly labored as we climbed the grand staircase to the second floor. Her suite was a testament to elegant comfort. A sitting room in soft blues and creams led to a bedroom with a 4-poster bed and antique furniture. A nurse's station had been discreetly incorporated into the decor, complete with medical equipment and a locked medication cabinet. "The code is my birthday," Maria said, seeing me eye the cabinet. "August 15th, 1945, 8:15:45. I helped her into a comfortable chair while I checked the medication schedule on my device. "You're due for your heart medication in about 20 minutes, I noted. "Yes, and I'll need the blood pressure pill as well tonight. My pressure always rises when Antonio has business associates visiting tomorrow," she sighed, slipping off her shoes with evident relief. I paused in the act of measuring her medication. "Business associates are coming here? Tomorrow?" Maria waved a dismissive hand. "Just a small gathering. Nothing for you to worry about. You'll stay with me in the garden room while they meet." Something in her tone made me suspect these weren't ordinary businessmen coming to discuss olive oil imports. I said nothing, focusing on preparing her medications instead. After Maria had taken her pills and I'd helped her into bed, I lingered by her bedside, oddly reluctant to leave her alone. "Is there anything else you need before I go?" She smiled up at me, suddenly looking very small against the plush pillows. "You're a good girl, Sophie. Antonio was right about you." "What do you mean?" "He's been watching you for weeks," she said, her voice growing sleepy. "Ever since you started at the restaurant. He said you had... what was it? A quiet dignity despite your circumstances." She yawned. "My son notices everything." A chill ran through me. Weeks? He'd been watching me for weeks before our supposed chance encounter. Before I could question her further, a soft knock came at the door. Antonio entered, his expression softening as he saw his mother already half asleep. "How is she?" he asked quietly. "Tired, but her vitals are stable," I replied, professional mode engaging automatically, all medications administered on schedule. He nodded approvingly. You can go. I'll sit with her for a while. I moved toward the door, then paused. Your mother mentioned you've been watching me for weeks, before we met at the restaurant. Antonio's eyes narrowed slightly. My mother sometimes gets confused in the evenings. Does she? I held his gaze, refusing to back down, because she seemed very lucid to me. For a moment, tension crackled between us. Then Antonio sighed, gesturing for me to follow him into the hallway. Once the door closed behind us, he said, "Walk with me." We moved through the quiet house, our footsteps muffled by thick carpets. Antonio led me to a small sitting room, with French doors that opened onto a terrace overlooking the garden. The night air was cool, scented with roses and freshly cut grass. Yes, I knew who you were before that night, he admitted finally, leaning against the stone balustrade. I make it my business to know everyone who works in establishments I frequent. That doesn't explain why you were watching me specifically. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. 6 weeks ago, a young busboy dropped an entire tray of glasses near your section. Instead of leaving him to face the manager's wrath, you helped him clean up, then claimed responsibility for the accident yourself. I remembered the incident vaguely. The boy had been new, terrified of losing his job. It wasn't a big deal. It was to him. And it told me something important about your character. Antonio moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space of the terrace. A week later, you gave your lunch to a homeless man outside the restaurant. The next day, you stayed 2 hours after your shift to cover for a waitress whose child was sick. You were having me followed, I realized, anger flaring. Observed, he corrected. I've been looking for someone for my mother for months. Someone with integrity, compassion, someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated, his lips curved in a humorless smile. The irony is, those qualities are precisely why you questioned the arrangement today. I crossed my arms, unsettled by how thoroughly he'd investigated me without my knowledge. So, the meeting at the restaurant, my helping your mother, it was all orchestrated? No, he said firmly. That was genuine. My mother really did need help with her medication. Your response confirmed what I already suspected, that you were the right person. He studied me for a moment. Are you angry? I'm disturbed, I admitted. It feels invasive. In my world, Sophie, information is survival. I don't apologize for being thorough. He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head up to maintain eye contact, but I am sorry if it distresses you. The apology, however qualified, surprised me. Something shifted in the air between us. The power dynamic tilting ever so slightly. For the first time, I felt like Antonio was seeing me as a person worthy of consideration, not just a useful tool for his mother's care. I should check on your mother once more before turning in, I said, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze, with my own conflicted feelings. Of course. He stepped back, allowing me space. One more thing, Sophie. I paused at the door. Yes? My associates tomorrow. Stay close to my mother at all times. Don't wander the house alone while they're here. His voice had taken on that hard edge again. It's important. The warning sent a shiver down my spine. Understood. As I walked back to the guest house under a star-filled sky, the beauty of the estate contrasted sharply with the undercurrent of danger I sensed. I was beginning to realize that working for the Russos meant navigating invisible boundaries, unspoken rules. One misstep could have consequences I couldn't foresee. Yet despite the risks, despite the unsettling knowledge that Antonio had been watching me for weeks, I felt oddly exhilarated. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I wasn't merely surviving. I was stepping into a new chapter, one filled with mystery and possibility. What I didn't know, as I settled into the luxurious bed in the guest house, was that tomorrow's gathering would force me to confront the true nature of the Russo family business and my place within it, far sooner than I'd anticipated. I woke to the sound of vehicles arriving, the crunch of tires on gravel, car doors slamming, male voices exchanging muted greetings. Glancing at my phone, I saw it was barely 7 a.m. These business associates kept early hours. My device pinged with a message. Breakfast in Signora's suite at 7:30. F. I dressed quickly in slacks and a blouse from the new wardrobe, practical but elegant. As I crossed the garden toward the main house, I noticed increased security. Men in dark suits positioned strategically around the property, earpieces visible. They watched me with expressionless faces as I passed. Francesca met me at a side entrance, her usual stern demeanor intensified. "Signora is having a difficult morning," she said, leading me through a back staircase I hadn't used before. "Her arthritis is flaring, and she's anxious about the gathering." Maria was propped up in bed when we entered her suite, looking pale and drawn. Her fingers were visibly swollen, and she winced as she tried to adjust her position. "Sophie, thank goodness," she said, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I feel useless today. Everything hurts." I immediately switched to nurse mode, checking her vital signs and reviewing her medication chart. "Your blood pressure is elevated," I noted. "Have you taken your morning pills?" "I couldn't open the bottles," she admitted, gesturing to her gnarled hands. I prepared her medications, added a mild pain reliever after consulting her chart, and helped her take them with small sips of water. "Let's get you more comfortable," I said, adjusting her pillows and elevating her legs slightly. "Heat or ice for your hands?" "Heat, please. The warming mitts are in the bathroom cabinet." As I retrieved the therapeutic mitts and gently placed them on her hands, I asked casually, "Big meeting today?" Maria's eyes darted to Francesca, who was arranging breakfast on a small table. "Just some of Antonio's business partners. Quarterly discussions." She lowered her voice. "They make me nervous. Such serious men." Francesca excused herself to answer a knock at the door. When she returned, Antonio was with her. He looked immaculate as always in a charcoal suit, but the set of his jaw betrayed tension. His expression softened when he saw his mother. "Mama, you're not well," he said, crossing to kiss her forehead. "Just the arthritis, caro mio. Sophie is taking good care of me." She managed a stronger smile for her son. "Don't worry about me. Your guests are waiting." "They can wait," he said firmly. "I've put them in the East Wing study." He turned to me, his dark eyes assessing. "How is she really?" "Blood pressure is higher than ideal. Pain level seems moderate to severe. She needs rest and minimal stress today," I reported clinically, keeping my voice professional. He nodded once. "You'll stay with her in the garden room, as we discussed. Francesca will bring lunch there at noon." He leaned down to speak quietly to his mother in Italian, terms of endearment from his tone, though I couldn't understand the words. As he straightened, our eyes met briefly. Something unspoken passed between us. A shared concern for Maria, perhaps, or something more complex I couldn't define. Then his expression closed again, the business mask back in place. "I'll check on you later, Mama," he said, squeezing her shoulder gently before striding from the room. After breakfast, I helped Maria dress in a comfortable outfit and escorted her slowly to the garden room, a charming conservatory filled with exotic plants and comfortable seating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the rose garden, while providing complete privacy from the main house. "This is my sanctuary," Maria explained as she settled into a cushioned wicker chair. "Antonio had it built for me 5 years ago, after his father died. He said I needed a place filled with life and beauty." I arranged a throw blanket over her legs and set up a small table with her medications, water, and a book she'd been reading. "It's beautiful. So peaceful." "Yes, and conveniently far from the East Wing," she said with a knowing look. "Antonio doesn't like me anywhere near his meetings. Protecting you from the boring business talk?" I suggested lightly. Maria's laugh was tinged with something darker. "My dear, we both know my son's business isn't always conducted in boardrooms with contracts and handshakes." She sighed, looking suddenly older. The Russo name wasn't always associated with olive oil imports and real estate. I sat across from her, uncertain how to respond. Part of me didn't want confirmation of what I already suspected about Antonio's activities. Plausible deniability seemed safer. "Tell me about your grandmother," Maria said, changing the subject. "The one who raised you." Grateful for the diversion, I described my grandmother's tiny house in Queens, her garden where she grew tomatoes and basil, her collection of romance novels that she read and reread until the pages fell out. How she'd worked 2 jobs after my parents' death in a car accident when I was 8. How she'd taught me to find beauty in small things. A perfect cup of coffee, the first crocuses in spring, the feeling of clean sheets after a long day. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Maria said, her eyes soft with empathy. "She would be proud of you, Sophie." "I hope so," I replied, throat tightening unexpectedly. I promised her I'd finish nursing school, but after the bills, it seemed impossible. Maria reached for my hand, her arthritic fingers warm against mine. "Nothing is impossible with the right support. Antonio told me he's arranging to clear your grandmother's medical debt." I blinked, stunned. "He's what?" "It's already done, I believe. He made some calls this morning." She squeezed my hand. "Consider it a signing bonus." A complex mix of emotions washed over me. Gratitude, discomfort, suspicion. "That's incredibly generous, but no buts," Maria interrupted gently. "My son can be difficult, intimidating even, but he takes care of those he considers family." "I'm not family," I pointed out. "Not yet," she replied cryptically. "But you're under our protection now. That means something in our world." Before I could question her further, a commotion erupted from the direction of the main house. Raised voices, a crash, footsteps pounding on marble floors. Maria tensed, her face paling. "Lock the door," she whispered urgently. I moved quickly to secure the conservatory, my heart racing. Through the windows I saw security personnel running toward the east wing, hands reaching inside their jackets. "What's happening?" I asked, moving back to Maria's side. "Business disagreements sometimes get heated," she said, her voice tight with worry. "It's nothing for you to—" The sound of a gunshot cracked through the air. Maria flinched, her hand flying to her chest. I immediately checked her pulse, rapid but steady, and reached for her medication. "No," she gasped, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "No pills, just stay with me." More shouting, another crash. Then silence, heavy and ominous. We sat frozen, minutes stretching endlessly, until a sharp knock at the conservatory door made us both jump. "Signora, it's Francesca. Mr. Russo sent me to check on you." Maria nodded at me to open the door. Francesca entered, her usual composure slightly fractured. "Everything is fine," she said automatically. "Mr. Russo asks that you remain here until he comes for you." "Was that a gunshot?" I asked directly. Francesca's eyes flickered to Maria, then back to me. "A car backfiring. Nothing to concern yourself with." The obvious lie hung in the air. I didn't press further, focusing instead on Maria, whose color was slowly returning. I checked her blood pressure again, elevated but not dangerously so, and helped her sip some water. Nearly an hour passed before the conservatory door opened again. Antonio stood there, his suit jacket gone, shirt sleeves rolled up, a small cut visible on his cheekbone. His eyes immediately sought his mother. "Mama," he said, crossing to her in 3 long strides. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Antonio." She touched his face gently, examining the cut. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." He glanced at me. "Her vitals?" "Stable now," I reported. "Blood pressure elevated during the incident, but returning to baseline." He nodded, his gaze lingering on mine, searching for something. Judgment, perhaps, or fear. I kept my expression neutral, professional. Whatever had happened in that meeting, it wasn't my place to question it, not yet, anyway. "The house is clear," he said to his mother. "Our guests have departed." The subtle emphasis on departed sent a chill down my spine. I busied myself arranging Maria's medications, giving them a moment of privacy as they exchanged quiet words in Italian. "Sophie," Antonio said finally, "walk with me." It wasn't a request. I glanced at Maria, who nodded reassuringly. "Go, dear. I'll rest here a while longer." Antonio led me through the garden, away from the house, toward a small structure I hadn't noticed before. A stone gazebo nestled among ancient oak trees. The security personnel who had been so visible earlier had vanished, though I sensed they weren't far. Inside the gazebo, Antonio gestured for me to sit on a stone bench. He remained standing, his energy too intense to be contained. "What you heard earlier," he began. A car backfiring, I supplied, keeping my tone light. According to Francesca, his lips twitched, almost a smile. Yes, a car. He studied me intently. You're not naive, Sophie. You understand the nature of my business isn't always conventional. I chose my words carefully. I understand that your family operates by different rules than I'm accustomed to. And that doesn't frighten you, should it? He moved closer, his presence filling the small space. Most people would have run after hearing gunfire. You stayed with my mother, kept her calm, monitored her health. Why? The answer came easily, surprising me with its truth. Because that's my job now. Because she needed me. Antonio reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. You're either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both, I admitted, my pulse quickening at his touch. His dark eyes searched mine, and for a moment the mask slit, revealing something vulnerable, almost yearning. Then he stepped back, composure restored. My mother likes you, he said. She trusts you already. And you? Do you trust me, Antonio? He considered the question, head tilted slightly. I'm beginning to. That's not something I say lightly. In that moment, standing in the dappled sunlight of the gazebo, I realized I was crossing a line, moving deeper into the Russo world with every passing hour. The sensible part of me screamed to walk away, to return to my simple life of double shifts and mounting bills. But another part, a part I was only beginning to acknowledge, wanted to stay, to understand this complex, dangerous man and the power he wielded. The trial period still stands, Antonio said, misreading my silence. If you want to leave after witnessing today's disagreement, no one will stop you. It was an exit offered, a chance to escape. Instead, I found myself asking, will your mother be safe if I go? Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Your concern is for her, not yourself. That's why you belong here, Sophie. He extended his hand, an invitation rather than a command. After only a moment's hesitation, I took it, his fingers warm and strong around mine. With that simple gesture, I knew I'd made my choice. For better or worse, I was now part of the Russo family's orbit. 2 months passed with surprising swiftness. My days fell into a comfortable routine, mornings with Maria, helping with her medications and accompanying her to doctor appointments or social engagements. Afternoons spent reading in the garden, or assisting Francesca with household matters. Evenings often included dinner with both Russos, though Antonio was frequently absent, his business taking him away at unpredictable intervals. The guest house had become home, my few belongings now supplemented with gifts from Maria, art books, potted orchids, cashmere throws that felt like clouds against my skin. My grandmother's medical debts had been quietly erased, the collection notices ceasing as if by magic. And true to his word, Antonio had arranged for a private tutor to help me complete my nursing degree, the lessons scheduled around Maria's needs. I rarely thought about my old apartment, my former life. This new existence, luxurious and strange as it was, had become normal with alarming speed. What hadn't become normal was my growing awareness of Antonio, the way my pulse quickened when he entered a room, the electricity that sparked between us during our increasingly frequent conversations, the lingering glances I pretended not to notice. There was an unspoken tension building, a gravitational pull I struggled to resist. Tonight, Maria had retired early with a migraine, leaving me alone in the garden room with a novel I couldn't focus on. The house felt unusually quiet. No security personnel visible, no hushed conversations behind closed doors. I'd grown accustomed to the constant, subtle reminders of Antonio's other life, the life he kept carefully separated from his mother's peaceful existence. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Antonio stood there, more casual than I'd ever seen him, in dark jeans and a simple black sweater, a bottle of wine in one hand, 2 glasses in the other. "I thought you might like some company," he said, hesitating at the threshold as if uncertain of his welcome, a first in our acquaintance. "Please," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. "How's Maria?" "Sleeping. The medication you gave her helped." He poured 2 glasses of deep red wine, handing one to me. "You've been good for her. Better than I hoped." I took a sip, the rich flavors blooming on my tongue. I've grown to care for her very much. She thinks of you as the daughter she never had, he said, watching me over the rim of his glass. She talks about you constantly when you're not around. And what about you, Antonio? I asked, emboldened by the wine and the intimate setting. What do you think of me? His eyes darkened, and he set his glass down carefully. I think you're the most intriguing woman I've ever met. I think you've brought light into this house that has been missing for years. He leaned forward slightly. I think you're dangerous to me in ways you don't understand. The raw honesty of his answer caught me off guard. Dangerous? I'm just a waitress who helps your mother take her pills. No, he said firmly. You were never just anything, Sophie. From the first moment I saw you, truly saw you, I knew you would complicate my life. He stood abruptly, moving to the windows that overlooked the nighttime garden. I told myself I was bringing you here for my mother. That was only partly true. My heart pounded as I rose to join him at the window. What was the rest of the truth? He turned to face me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I wanted you close. I wanted to understand what makes you different from everyone else in my world. His hand rose to my face, fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with exquisite gentleness. Everyone in my life fears me, respects me, wants something from me, but not you. You look at me and see a man, not a position or a name or a threat. I see all of it, I admitted, leaning slightly into his touch. The businessman, the son, the other roles you play. I just don't let any single aspect define you. His thumb brushed my lower lip, sending electricity coursing through me. And that's precisely why you're dangerous. You see too clearly. What happened next seemed inevitable. His lips meeting mine, tentative at first, then with growing urgency as I responded. His arms encircled me, strong and secure, drawing me against the solid warmth of his chest. I wound my fingers through his hair, softer than I'd imagined, as the kiss deepened. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, I saw vulnerability in his eyes I'd never witnessed before. Sophie, he whispered, my name a question and a prayer. This complicates things, I said, my voice unsteady. A rueful smile touched his lips. Everything about you has complicated things from the beginning. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the moment. He checked it, his expression immediately shifting to the mask I recognized. Business Antonio replacing the man who had just kissed me with such tenderness. I have to go, he said, regret evident in his tone. A situation requires my attention. Of course, I replied, stepping back, creating necessary distance between us. I understand. He caught my hand, bringing it to his lips. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. There are things we need to discuss. About us, about what this means. After he left, I remained in the garden room for a long time, touching my lips where I could still feel the pressure of his kiss, trying to process the seismic shift in our relationship. I wasn't naive enough to believe that loving Antonio Russo would be simple or safe. His world contained dangers I'd only glimpsed, boundaries and rules I was only beginning to understand. Yet as I finally made my way back to the guest house under a canopy of stars, I felt strangely at peace with whatever came next. In 2 months, I'd transformed from a struggling waitress to a woman who stood eye to eye with one of the most powerful men in Brooklyn. I wasn't the same person who had trembled at his approach in Bella Rosa. Dawn was breaking when an urgent knocking pulled me from sleep. I opened the door to find Francesca, her face pale with worry. "Come quickly," she said. Signora Maria collapsed in the bathroom. "Mr. Russo is with her, but he's asking for you." I dressed hastily and ran to the main house, heart pounding. Maria's bedroom was a flurry of activity. A doctor I recognized from previous house calls bent over her still form, Antonio standing rigidly nearby, his face a mask of controlled fear. "What happened?" I asked, moving immediately to check Maria's vital signs myself. "Heart arrhythmia," the doctor replied. "Severe. We need to get her to a hospital immediately." Antonio's eyes met mine, silently asking a question I understood immediately. "I'll go with her," I assured him. "I won't leave her side." Relief flickered across his face. "The car is ready. I'll follow as soon as I can." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors. whispered consultations with cardiologists, and anxious waiting. I stayed beside Maria's bed in the cardiac unit, monitoring every fluctuation in her condition, advocating fiercely when I felt the hospital staff weren't being attentive enough. My partial nursing training proved invaluable as I interpreted medical jargon and treatment plans. Antonio arrived mid-morning, having apparently cleared his schedule indefinitely. He moved through the hospital with the same commanding presence he exhibited everywhere, but I could see the worry etching lines around his eyes, the fear he concealed from everyone but me. "The doctors say she's stabilizing," I told him quietly as we stood in the hallway outside Maria's room. "The new medication is helping regulate her heartbeat. They want to keep her for a few days for observation." He nodded, rubbing a hand over his face, a rare gesture of fatigue. "You look exhausted," he noted, studying me. "You've been here all night. Go home, get some rest." "I promised I wouldn't leave her," I reminded him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Always keeping your word. One of many reasons He stopped himself, glancing around the public hallway. "We'll talk later. At least sit down, have some coffee. I'll stay with her." As the day progressed, Maria's condition improved steadily. By evening, she was awake and alert, though weak. Antonio had arranged for a private room with additional amenities, and the hospital staff treated us with an almost excessive deference that spoke volumes about his influence. "Both of you, stop hovering," Maria scolded weakly, as Antonio adjusted her pillows for the third time, and I checked her IV line again. "I'm not dying today." "Hush, Mama," Antonio said, his voice gentle but firm. "You scared years off my life. Let me fuss over you a little." She reached for his hand, then mine, bringing them together on the bedside. "My two protectors," she said, smiling tiredly. "So much alike in the ways that matter." I felt Antonio's fingers tighten around mine, a silent acknowledgement of the connection his mother had recognized long before we had. Something settled between us in that moment. An unspoken understanding, a shared purpose that transcended our complicated feelings. Later that night, with Maria sleeping peacefully and extra nurses stationed nearby, Antonio insisted I return to the house for proper rest. "The car is waiting," he said. "I'll stay tonight. We'll trade tomorrow." Too exhausted to argue, I allowed myself to be escorted to the familiar black sedan. To my surprise, Antonio walked me to the car, opening the door himself rather than leaving it to security. "Sophie," he said quietly, before I could get in. "Thank you isn't enough for what you did today. The doctor said your quick action, recognizing the symptoms and getting her help immediately." He paused, emotion making his voice rougher than usual. "You saved my mother's life. I was just doing my job," I replied, swaying slightly with fatigue. His hands settled on my shoulders, steadying me. "It's never been just a job to you. That's what makes you extraordinary." He brushed a gentle kiss across my forehead. "Go rest. We'll talk when this is behind us." The next 3 days established a new routine. Antonio and I taking shifts at the hospital, coordinating Maria's care, interfacing with doctors. We worked seamlessly together, our personal feelings set aside in service of her recovery. Yet even in that clinical setting, something had shifted between us. Casual touches lingered. Gazes held longer than necessary. The air seemed charged whenever we occupied the same space. On the 4th day, Maria was cleared to return home, with strict instructions for rest and medication management. Antonio had transformed the main floor guest suite into a temporary bedroom for her, eliminating the need for stairs during her recovery. As we settled her into the new space, surrounded by her favorite things brought down from her bedroom, Maria looked between us with shrewd eyes. "Well," she said, "at least something good came from my old heart acting up." "Mama," Antonio warned, but she waved him off. "I'm not blind, caro mio. I see how you look at each other when you think I'm not watching." She reached for my hand. "Sophie, you were meant to be part of this family. I knew it the moment you helped me with my pills that night." I blushed, glancing at Antonio, who was watching his mother with a mixture of exasperation and affection. "Maria, you need to rest, not play matchmaker." "Bah," she scoffed. "Life is too short for pretending." "My collapse should teach you both that much." She patted the bed beside her. "Antonio, bring me my jewelry box from the dresser." He complied, setting an ornate wooden box beside her. Maria opened it with slightly trembling fingers, removing a ring, an antique emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds set in platinum. "This was my mother's, and her mother's before her," she said, holding it out to me. "In our family, it passes to the woman who will carry the Russo name forward." I gasped, looking from the ring to Antonio, who appeared equally stunned. "Maria, I can't possibly—" "You can and you will," she insisted, "when the time is right. I'm not saying marry him tomorrow. Heaven knows my son needs time to get used to the idea of sharing his life properly. But someday." She pressed the ring into my palm, closing my fingers around it. "Keep it safe until then." Antonio moved to my side, his arm slipping around my waist. "Mama, you're getting ahead of things," he said, though his voice held more amusement than objection. "Am I?" she challenged. "Tell me you haven't thought about it." Instead of answering her, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Sophie came into our lives to help you, Mama. What happens next should be her choice, not something arranged by either of us." I looked up at him, touched by his respect for my autonomy, especially given his tendency to arrange things as he saw fit. "And if my choice is to stay?" I asked softly. "Not just as Maria's companion, but as something more?" His eyes darkened with emotion. "Then I would be the most fortunate man in New York." Maria clapped her hands delightedly. "There, it's settled. Now both of you leave me to rest. I'm suddenly feeling much better." We exited her room together, both laughing softly at her transparent matchmaking. In the hallway, Antonio drew me into his arms, his expression growing serious. "She may be pushing, but her instincts are rarely wrong," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "These past months, watching you care for her, seeing your strength and compassion, I've fallen in love with you, Sophie. I didn't plan to, tried to fight it even, but there it is." My heart soared at his words, yet practicality made me hesitate. "Your world is complicated, Antonio. Dangerous, even. Are you sure you want me in it completely?" "My world is dangerous," he agreed, his hands framing my face. "But it's also full of loyalty, family, tradition, values I think you understand better than most." He rested his forehead against mine. "I can't promise you a normal life, but I can promise that you'll always be protected, always respected, always loved." In that moment, standing in the hallway of a house that had become my home, I knew my decision had been made long ago. Perhaps from the first moment our eyes met across the restaurant. My life had changed irrevocably the night I helped an elderly woman take her pills, never suspecting she would become like a mother to me, or that her son would claim my heart. "I love you too," I whispered against his lips. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As his mouth claimed mine in a kiss that sealed our future, I felt the weight of the emerald ring in my pocket, a promise of belonging, of family, of a life I'd never imagined but now couldn't picture living without. The waitress and the Mafia boss, an unlikely story perhaps, but now undeniably ours.